You're listening to the Night Demon Network. Go to nightdemon.net/subscriber to unlock more exclusive content.
Hello and welcome to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. I'm your host, Nesbitt, and in past episodes, we talked about the history of the members of Night Demon. We discussed the formation of the band, and now the self-titled EP, the title track, the namesake song, the anthem of the band. This is Night Demon Part 1. So, if you remember from before, Night Demon, then going by the name Ancient Evil at the time, they had 4 jams, 4 original songs. The 5th time they get together, April 22nd, 2011, they decide it will be in a studio, recording what would become the self-titled Night Demon EP. Here's Jarvis Leatherby.
We didn't want to waste any more time. Not that we were wasting time at all, but we were just... The inspiration was there. We had gotten together 5 times, had a cover song and 4 originals. So we figured the next time we get together, it's time to record these songs. I do remember we actually discussed, well, do we write more songs and do a full length? But again, that took away from our idea of wanting to do an EP and do a 7-inch. And again, Brent and I had a very decisive conversation that this band was never to do a full length. Never. It was the EP and that was it. I am glad that eventually changed. But honest to God, hand to heart, that's what it was. That was the idea behind it. And so the next time we got together, it was a scheduled recording session for the band Ancient Evil, as we were still called that, at Satellite Studios, which is now known as the Captain's Quarters, with our producer and engineer, Armand John Anthony.
As far as the recording process goes, we kept it pretty basic, because when those guys came to me, they were still under the idea that this thing was just going to be like a demo, and that it wasn't going to be a real band. It was almost like a mock-up thing, and they were going to take on these alter egos and, sell it as this is the coolest band that you never heard of, from back in the day. So with that in mind, going into the recording process, I was keeping that in mind. So as I was recording things, we tried to keep it, keep that kind of sound, go for that kind of old school sound. Pat's drums, for example, we used his toms. They were concert toms, which have no bottom head. And that was a very big thing in the late 70s and early 80s with drums. And I mic'd them from the inside, which was kind of a technique that was popular back then. Things like that. We kept it real basic with the guitar tracks. It's one guitar track, split into a stereo signal with the echo so that you have 2 sides. He didn't overdub another rhythm guitar. We overdubbed the solos, of course. And even with the solos, it was like kind of using that really kind of fast slapback echo to give it that new wave of British heavy metal sound.
The recording process was very quick, very easy, and very fun. Armand was the absolute perfect guy to go to for this. You know, we had been friends for a long time. We had been rehearsing next door. All of our bands had recorded in there. He had recorded a lot of Heartbeat stuff straight to tape. He had done the last 2 fucking Wrath records. So we were all familiar with actually recording with him, not just being friends with him or playing in bands with him. Pat brought in his Black Ludwig drum set with concert toms, which were great because there's no bottom head or rim on those toms, so you just old school put the mic right in there. He had some old heads on there too, and it just sounded really thuddy, like his name, or the name I gave him, Thud. You know, Brent brought in his 78 Marshall JMP 100-watt head. He had this custom kind of like Judas Priest inspired Strat or single pickup. It was almost like a kind of like an Eddie Van Halen Strat, but it had a hardtail. I borrowed an old 60s P bass from our friend Sam Boley, and this thing actually had like nylon strings on it. So they weren't even metal strings, but it just sounded really cool. And I ran that through my 1974 Trainer YBA3 into 412 guitar speakers, and it just sounded amazing. Awesome vintage tones. Armand did a really good job. He used his Roland Space Echo, tape echo for a lot of the stuff on Brent's guitar and put a little bit of delay on one side of it. So it was just perfect. And we just went in and knocked it out. No pressure, no click track, none of that stuff. And we just knocked it out in an afternoon. And I remember Armand saying, "You want to do vocals?" And I was like, of course, I'm always, I'm not ready. And he's like, "Well, just go in and try it out." And I went in and I just sang all 4 songs, and that was it. And it was good. It was good enough. And the other 2 guys in the band were really happy about it. I can remember I felt really proud because they were really happy about it. And I remember Brent calling me like the next day and said, "Man, I went home and Pat came over and we listened to it." And he's like, "Man, your vocals are just a breath of fresh air, for us." And I was so honored by that. It really gave me the confidence to be the singer in this band.
So the band recorded these 4 tracks, and since it was a fun side project with no pressure or expectations, with an experienced producer and engineer like Armand at the helm, the recording goes really smoothly, comes together quick. One day, 4 tracks. Here's Dusty Squires.
At that time, I was homeless with New Liberty, so most of the time we were living at the studio in our camper in the parking lot. But when we knew Armand had sessions, we would leave the studio because we weren't, people didn't feel comfortable with us just hanging around and listening to what they have going on. And I know how that is, because when I'm recording in the studio, I don't want just anybody sitting in there listening to what we're doing. But I know they cut it really quickly. It's an instant classic. Whatever they were doing at the time, whatever chemistry was there, whatever stars aligned to make it happen, Night Demon EP. Pretty cool.
So it is the original founding lineup, Jarvis Leatherby, Brent Woodward, and Pat Bailey, that entered the studio. But even years before he would become a member, Armand John Anthony was still a big part of the band's sound, even in these very early days.
I think as far as my producing, and suggesting anything, I think as I would normally do as a guitar player, I definitely worked with Brent a lot on his solos and stuff like that. So I feel like I've always been a big part of helping the band in that aspect, I remember sitting down with him in the room and, there was stuff that maybe he didn't even really have an idea for, and we would sit there and I'd grab a guitar and he'd have his guitar and we would just sit there and I'd be like, "All right, well, where are you starting?" And then I'd kind of give him an idea of where to go in the middle and how to end it, or vice versa, and that's kind of how it went. And I think with the vocals, I'm pretty sure I suggested doing some of the vocal harmonies, That's kind of my thing. I'm a big harmony guy, and So if I did suggest anything, I'm sure it would have been that kind of stuff.
When we went into the studio, Armand did help a lot with, we brought in our gear that we were using at the rehearsal space already. So it was Pat's black Ludwig kit. I had my 1974 Trainer YBA3 tubed head, which is kind of like the Canadian Marshall of the day. And Brent had put together like a custom guitar. He had just bought parts online and kind of made this Stratocaster that had a single DiMarzio super distortion pickup in the bridge. And he loved that thing, and it was awesome. So he had that in his 1978 Marshall JMP head into his cabinet with some vintage 30 speakers in it. I think it was a Randall cabinet. And that's what we rehearsed with. And we just brought it straight next door to Armand's studio, and he mic'd everything up, and we just had to go. So, it was great. We tracked everything in one day. And, not just for Night Demon, but for all the songs.
So right off the bat, the first song these guys record, what would become the anthem of the band to this day?
As far as having a song that was the namesake of the band, that's something that we wanted from the very beginning. Before we even played, we were called the Chalice. Then we rehearsed and wrote Night Demon. Then we were called Night Demon with a K. Then it was back to the Chalice when we wrote that. Then we wrote Ancient Evil, and the band was called Ancient Evil, only to finally come back to the name Night Demon, which didn't actually happen until after the EP was recorded. Looking back in my old calendar from 2011, written down in there, the day that we recorded the EP, the day that we went in to record, it was written as Ancient Evil Recording. So truth be told, when the debut EP was actually tracked in the studio, we were called Ancient Evil. The way that the name Night Demon came about, I was researching sleep paralysis. And for those who don't know, sleep paralysis is a sleeping disorder where basically your body is asleep, but your mind is awake. And this is something that I've suffered from for most of my life. When I was young, I had nightmares almost every single night. You could set your watch by it. I used to go have sleepovers a lot at friends' houses, and their parents would just kind of be waiting for it to happen until it did. They would kind of know how to calm me down. Looking back on it, it seems like a really crazy thing. But, when that stopped, the sleep paralysis thing kind of came into my life. And it's a really freaky thing. If you can imagine your body being completely asleep, but your mind totally awake. I suffer from claustrophobia, stuff like this, especially during the sleep paralysis episodes. So it's just a total panic inside, but you can't do anything about that. So, I was just doing some research on it. And I remember at the time of starting the band and doing this recording, I was really having hard times with it. I had a lot going on in my life at the time, and I was playing in a ton of bands, and I had a really demanding day job that was an hour outside of town each way, and I wasn't getting much sleep. And so the sleep paralysis was really, I was just having some heavy spells at that time. So, I was just doing some research on it because I'd never really had before. And what I found out is that, this has been something that's been going on for centuries. And back in the day, they used to call sleep paralysis the Night Demon, which I thought was totally fucking crazy. Just the coincidence of it. And so basically the Night Demon was like a demon that would come in at night and sit on your chest as you were sleeping and look directly down on you during the sleep paralysis episodes. And you would be looking right into its eyes, and there's nothing you could do. Your body couldn't move anyway. So that's totally when the light bulb went off. And what I thought was cool was like once you took the K off of the name, I mean, we had already toyed with the idea, like we had changed the name of the song early on in the demo phases from Night Demon with a K to Night Demons with an N. So once I saw this in print, it was like, oh, here it is. It's perfect. And, you know, after being in 30 plus bands through my life, I had kind of been around the block as far as making a lot of mistakes in bands and choosing band names. And, you know, like you don't really want to have a band name with a color, unless it's black, I guess. But, you know, like Black Sabbath. But, you know, that kind of ruins your design schemes because you're kind of stuck to that. There's a lot of different things that I learned through the years after it was kind of too late, right? But with Night Demon, I had a fresh start here. And what I really liked about the name was, well, a few things. First of all, it sounds pretty heavy metal, Night Demon, right? Sounds like a horror movie, Night Demon, like the movie Night of the Demons. It had to do with sleep paralysis, something that I was currently and still do suffer with occasionally. It's gotten a lot better, but it had to do with that, which was also something that's pretty freaky, right? And what I really loved about it was that both words have the same amount of letters in it, 5 letters, 5 and 5. So you can create a symmetrical logo. And in heavy metal, half of it is the art, in my opinion. The other half is the music. Well, I mean, all of it's the music, okay? It always comes down to music. But the imagery is so important. And the logo is important. And I'm a firm believer that once you settle on something and you pick a logo, you got to stick with it. And we've done that throughout our career. But just choosing the name and having it Night Demon instead of Ancient Evil, looking back 10 years later, it was definitely the right choice. And I'm really glad that fate stepped in that moment. All of my struggles with sleep paralysis, they happened for a reason. And the Night Demon was there in my bed, sitting on my chest, looking down at me, giving me the message for the name for this band.
So the first song recorded, the first song written, eventually spawning the name of the band, the song that started with Brent Woodward's first riff at that very first jam.
Like many great heavy metal and hard rock songs, most of them start out with a great guitar riff. Case in point, our song Night Demon. This was literally the first riff of the band Night Demon. Brent had this riff before we even started the band. So I think he was kind of jamming already, and stuff that wasn't working out for the fucking Wrath, he was kind of stockpiling. And really, I think this riff is what inspired the band, the creation of the band, at least in his mind, on his end, while simultaneously we're coexisting on the same plane, kind of feeling the urge for the same thing to happen for us to be in a band like this. But it wasn't until we met that came to be. The riff is a classic one for sure. And right when he played it, I already knew we were on the same page. Because, before this, we were talking about the same music. We had never played together at all. So with the exception of the first time we got together, the three of us, and played the cover of Diamond Head's Lightning to the Nations, when he busted out that riff and showed us, I was like, okay, we're totally on the right track now.
The main riff for me is kind of like it's kind of a throwback to Motorheady. I think it's kind of a Motorhead kind of riff. or I don't know, it's sort of thrashy, a little more punk rock, I guess, because it's not as like tight, palm muting kind of stuff, or I don't know. I just, whenever I play that song, it just seems a little more kind of a loose, fun riff to play.
Hey guys, Nesbitt here. If you would like to support Night Demon and this podcast, the best way to do it is to become a Night Demon subscriber. Not only will you be doing your part to support a true heavy metal band out there really living it, you'll also gain access to a ton of extras. Bonus audio content, a subscriber-only merch store with rare items from the band's archives. You can stream never-before-heard demos and unearthed live concerts from the live vaults. Communicate with the other Night Demon diehards on an exclusive subscriber forum, and gain early access to all press releases, album pre-orders, new merchandise, and a ton more. And another thing that I think is pretty cool is Night Demon will be donating 10% of every subscription fee to the Metal Cares Foundation, which is a charitable fund the band started in 2014 to aid those in our metal community. So head over to nightdemon.net/subscriber and join us as we make heavy metal history together as one. And on a side note, I'll personally think you're a grade A badass.
Yeah, there's no real like production tricks or, little things that are, different, man. It's just straight ahead rock song, It's as the lyrics say, it's kind of like a party song. So we just kept it straight up, the guitars, we just did one rhythm guitar on all these songs. I did this trick where I split the signal and to kind of create a stereo effect so that the guitar is coming out of both speakers, even though it's just one guitar. You could always just have it pan in the center of the spectrum of the left and right stereo field. But, there's a lot of other things that are in the center, like the, kick drum snare, the bass, the vocals. So the more you start stacking things up, on top of each other in the middle of the stereo field, things kind of get a little muddied up. So you always kind of want to, normally you pan, you do two guitar tracks, you like what we do now. What I've done with Darkness Remains is, I do one guitar track, then I double it. I play it again pretty much exactly the way, the first track is, and then you pan it hard left and hard right, and it creates this really cool sound. But we didn't want to do that with this. We wanted to keep it a little more raw. If you listen to all the early Van Halen stuff, you can literally pan, if you turn off the left speaker, I think it is, all you're going to hear in the right is the reverb of Eddie's guitar. So it's kind of like a thing like that. And, you don't really notice it when you're listening to it on the radio or, on your phone or something, because you don't really have that stereo spread. But once you get some headphones on, you can really hear that. So, we took that and elaborated on it a little bit more and just did that pan. Instead of using a reverb, you use a really short delay, like a 20 to 40 milliseconds, depending on how like wide you want it or how noticeable you want it to be. And you pan that to the other side. And that's how you get that full sound without having it just centered in the stereo field. The initial intro solo to that song is what we would reference to or call do the Ace Frehley thing. That's how I would communicate with Brent when I was producing these albums, or at least that EP, when it was time for solos. We'd kind of like name certain little like riff runs by the type of guitar player that they kind of sounded like. So that's a very Ace Frehley Kiss kind of do diddle do diddle do diddle do. Guitar players out there, you know what I'm talking about.
Aside from a killer riff and a cool opening solo, the song has something else. This song sort of defined, right from the beginning, the signature sound for Night Demon.
The middle part with the bass and guitar harmony. So this is where Night Demon sets apart from most bands in the genre that is called the new wave of traditional heavy metal. It's a genius way to kind of trick the listener into thinking that there's more than one guitar player in the band. Most people wouldn't associate bass guitar with playing high, lead kind of parts. So I think it's a genius thing that they came up with as far as doing harmonies with the bass and the guitar. Now the bass, Jarvis's tone already kind of has a guitar kind of sound to it. It's not like about a lot of low end. It's got some distortion, some grind on it. So that lends itself. If he goes up high and plays some high notes, well, it's almost indistinguishable from another guitar. So, there are many times after shows when people come up to me and ask me, how the fuck do you guys do that? It sounds like there's another guitar player on stage. How do you do those harmonies with only one guitar? They still don't get it, even though we're doing it right in front of them. It's just something that you don't hear very often.
When we're doing Night Demon and there are those breaks with the guitar and bass harmonizing and stuff, that's a really cool part. I think those guys did a really good job writing that one up.
I think it could be. There's probably some stuff that probably comes a little bit from Maiden. I could see that there's some parts. I can't tell you specifically that there might be something similar to that, but I really can't think of hearing that kind of thing with any other band. There's always Cliff Burton, the stuff that he did, like in the song Orion. For a long time, I always thought that was guitars, that middle section with the kind of drony bass. It's a bass playing high notes lead. Now, they're not necessarily harmonizing with the guitar, but he's harmonizing with himself with the overdubs. I don't know if they've ever done that live as far as harmonizing with the guitar and the bass like that, but there's definitely an inspiration from there. And just, it's just kind of an effect from having just being a three-piece, It's like, well, how do we do this stuff without having another guitar player? So Jarvis figured out to do that. I imagine that was his idea. I don't really know whose idea that was to do that, but that sounds like, to me, a very Jarvis thing. He's always good at coming up with, outside of the box ideas with stuff like that. So I tip my hat to him for that kind of stuff.
The bass and guitar harmony in the middle of the song. Okay, so we get to the bridge and we came up with this big break part. And Brent had this riff. So Brent had that riff, and I thought, well, let's go to C now in the break. And instead of him just playing it by himself again, let me try and harmonize it. So traditionally with heavy metal bands, 2 guitars is the way to go. If you're going way back to Wishbone Ash, Judas Priest, Thin Lizzy, up through Iron Maiden, Metallica, Slayer, all that. And it's not necessarily just for a rhythm player and a lead player and a rhythm guitar to back up the lead guitar player while he's doing a lead. It's really, in heavy metal, for guitar harmonies. And when you're doing guitar harmonies, you have to have something backing it up. So that's usually the bass player's job. You're playing the backing notes. So the 2 guitar players can play a harmonizing melody over that. Well, in Night Demon, we've got a big problem, right? Because there's only 3 of us. There's not 2 guitar players. There's only 1. So I thought this was a great opportunity, since there was a break in the song and he was just playing that simple line by himself, that I could harmonize it with the bass and we wouldn't be missing anything. Nothing drops out because there was nothing else there in that spot to begin with. This was probably, I'm going to say it's one of the best moves that we ever made as a band, because doing this became Night Demon's signature. For any musician, at least who follows the band, they can definitely pick this out of, I don't know, probably 80% of our songs, if not more. I've never done the math on it, but harmonies with the guitar are such a big part of heavy metal, of the heavy metal style. It's not something that we wanted to lose. And, we had our 3-piece bands to look up to, like Motorhead or Tank, the Rods, Raven, ZZ Top. The list goes on and on. But Venom. The list goes on and on. Sorry for all the power trio influences that I left out. But again, that's the idea. Power trio, right? We're a power trio. We didn't need a second guitar player. I purposely had the gnarliest bass sound so we wouldn't need that. But the harmony thing, right? We're lacking there. So just by this one moment, having that break and coming up with that, I've kind of, I guess I'm giving our secret away here, but I guess we have 10 years of being a band to document that we were the ones to do it, I guess. But so the secret is, if you play higher up on the bass, on the lighter strings on the top, and if the guitar plays notes on the heavier strings on the bottom, the gauges of strings are very similar. So much like when two guitars are doing harmonies, they're both on the same gauge string, so it sounds very unison. Normally, if you do a harmony with a guitar and a bass, the bass is playing the low notes and the guitar is playing the high notes. It is a proper harmony, but there's something about it that just doesn't sound right. So I thought, hey, let me do the high and Brent, you do the low on the guitar so that we're similar in the thickness of the strings. And it just sounded awesome. It sounded like two guitars. And we were just like, oh man, that's so crazy. That's so awesome. You know, for a band that's here to, not only are we not trying to reinvent the wheel, we're actually purposely trying to sound like a band that came out 30 years ago. And, you know, we want to actually fool people that hear the recordings to think that it is a band from 30 years ago. So no intention at all to be original or groundbreaking at all with the music. But, you know, naturally we come up with this innovation in this old school style of music that we love that none of our heroes ever attempted. Or at least we didn't know it. We never heard it on the records or heard them do it live. So even looking back on it today, I'm so grateful that that moment happened, because without that, who knows? I mean, we may not have discovered that until way later. And I'm glad we did, because it's one thing, it's another thing, I should say, that makes Night Demon a solid 3-piece band. And it's just another thing that proves that we're solid as a 3-piece and we're not lacking in that area. All of the bass fills and the bass runs that I do in the bridge section and in the solo, you know, I mean, I think it's just to fill space. Again, I had developed a very powerful bass tone. However, I think that there needs to be a lot more happening underneath than just, I didn't want to just be the bass player. You know, I always looked at the bass in Night Demon as just a big guitar. Yes, there is another guitar player in the band. However, we wanted the guitar to also be able to be melodic and not just a chuggy machine, right? So whenever there was a guitar solo or anything where the bass could be more interesting and do something different than the guitar, you know, most bands with two guitar players, a lot of times the bass will just kind of follow the rhythm guitar to beef it up. And we just need to be more interesting than that. We have less musicians and less instruments in the band, so we need to make the most out of what we have. And again, that's where innovation happens, where we weren't even looking for it. So I just wanted to be an interesting bass player. I'd already had a lot of experience playing, and, I just wanted to do cool stuff. I was influenced by Cliff Burton. And Geezer Butler. Steve Harris. Lemmy from Motorhead. I took all of these guys. I'm going to say that's my big four. I took all of their styles. Well, I'll add Gene Simmons in there for good measure, actually. I will. So that's my big five right there. I took all those guys, I took their style. I know how to play most of the songs from those bands anyway, whether playing in tribute bands or just learning how to play, I would learn those songs. So that's what the Night Demon bass playing style is. It's basically those five guys combined. And it definitely, it shows. You can hear it in all of our music.
Well, that is it for part 1 of Night Demon. Next week, we'll pick it up with part 2 and some more cool clips as we continue to break the song down. Be sure to check the bonus area on nightdemon.net for demos and tons of unreleased material from these early days. Until next time, this is Nesbitt signing off.
Thanks for listening to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast. Head over to nightdemon.net, click on the subscriber tab, and sign up to access exclusive weekly bonus content. If you would like to donate to support the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast, you can do so through PayPal at paypal.me/nightdemonmetal. Additionally, if you have not already done so, please subscribe, like, rate, and review the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All hail, Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. This is Dusty Squires chiming in to tell you about my brand new signature sticks from the London Drumstick Company. I've dreamt of having my very own drumsticks ever since I was a wee lad, and LDC made that a possibility for me. Founded in 2016 in London, England, the birthplace of heavy metal, the London Drumstick Company has trailblazed a path through the music industry and taken the drummer world by storm. When I met them for the first time, they knew their product was going to withstand the beatings of a Night Demon show. They took the time to work with me on getting everything just right. The balance and weight of my sticks are the same no matter what, and the durability is bar none the best I've ever had. I know my sticks will last through the set night after night. I'm truly honored to work with a company that caters to their players the way LDC does. Their innovation and attention to detail is what separates them from the rest of the stick makers out there. Their custom stick sleeves are unbelievable and really make the entire presentation complete. Wait until you see the design they came up with for me. It blew my mind and was a surprise to say the least. They have all kinds of amazing swag, including hoodies, t-shirts, drummer shorts, drum keys, stick bags, towels, face masks, practice pads, and much, much more. Even if you're not a drummer, you can be a part of Demon history and order my brand new signature sticks direct from their website. How cool is that? And to top it off, the London Drumstick Company are giving an exclusive offer to the Night Demon Heavy Metal Podcast listeners. Go to londondrumsticks.co.uk and receive a 15% store-wide discount using promo code DEMONSTICKS. All capital letters, no spaces, Demon Sticks. DEMONSTICKS. I can't thank everyone there enough for the opportunity to be a part of their family and for them trusting me with their amazing products. See you metal maniacs on the road very soon. And yes, the wood chips will be flying.
Greetings, boils and ghouls. This is your comrade, the Crypt Keeper here, reporting dead from the sanctuary of the strange. Tonight's macabre myth is a fright-filled feature, one overflowing with monsters, madness, and magic.
Visit our website at monstersmadnessandmagic.com to stay up to date on all the dark dealings within the sanctuary of the strange. Enjoy the show.
Hey Metalheads, I'm Mark and I host Metal Forge. Let me tell you about the show. The Metal Forge features the best underground metal from all over the world. We spend every week with a different artist with interviews, in-depth conversations, and most of all, the music. We also feature audience interactivity where you can submit your questions to the upcoming guests. New episodes are out every Friday at noon Eastern Time at metalforgeradio.com or wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking podcast, a non-genre based, all ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
Okay, metalheads, you've been complaining that there has not been a channel that plays all of the heavy metal videos from past, present, and future for years and years at this point. Well, that time is over. Heavy Metal Television is back. HeavyMetalTelevision.net is the website. Go there. You can see videos playing 24/7, 365, all the time, all the best from the old school, the new school, and everything in between. Check it out, HeavyMetalTelevision.net. It is where the metal is.